Hey guys, welcome to another video. It's been a while since we kind of had a discussion about some of the mechanical side things in Guild Wars 2, some of the places that the game might deserve some kind of improvement. And today, just based on the way I was playing, some of the things I was doing with some build craft, as you know, you sometimes find you fall into doing, I realized I really wanted to talk to you guys about runes. I wanted to talk to you about some of the more common community suggestions on how to improve runes and give you some of my thoughts on it as well, because I'm curious what people think, especially since Heart of Thorns came out, gave us these extra runes. PvP has seen more runes getting incorporated and twisted around, even taken away, and yet still it seems like there's very little going on in terms of really new runes being used across the board. Yes, some of the Heart of Thorns elite specialization runes have seen some use, but I do think that it's generally speaking a very weak system and one that could be way better, especially if you get out there and play some other RPGs around you. You realize just how weak Guild Wars 2 is doing things. So I kind of want to discuss that with you guys, and I want to show you, point out exactly what the main problem with runes are. Now, I will just say straight away, a lot of the runes are bad. A lot of the runes people never consider or even look at, just because the core perks that ArenaNet have put on them are rubbish. They're terrible. And in a lot of cases, I would say there are no-brainer fixes to runes, where on an individual level, you need a developer who genuinely cares to sit down and say, okay, let's look at this. What could make this better, but stay in the same kind of flavor, and actually, you know, give it that time. And hopefully, eventually, the devs will have time to do that. What I'm suggesting is more of an overarching issue with the rune system and more of a general solution that can fix one of the core problems with all runes, irrespective of how strong the perks themselves actually are. So what am I talking about? Let's get into this here, guys. I got a lot of discussions as well, just to hone in on you just how bad this is with Guild Wars 2, okay? Now, the problem, I would say, with most runes that stops us being able to be creative as players in most cases is the simple fact, and many people will have identified this, is the simple fact that often the perks of the rune, the actual cool little proccing effects, the things that make it fun and flavorful and different to other runes, those often have no synergy or relation with the actual stats, the core stats that they have been bundled with. So, what do I mean by this? As I said, I've got a lot of examples. One of the more recent builds that I talked to you guys about, or rune sets involved with it, when Heart of Thorns came out with the Tempest, a very aura-heavy class, were Radiance runes. So if you guys aren't familiar with these bad boys, they're very cool. I like the runes with big visible effects, runes that have little animations associated with them, runes that proc significant things, yes, mechanically, but also even visually too. And Radiance runes are some of my favorite runes in the game just because they offer this. Radiance runes do lots of stuff to buff auras, and as a Tempest, you obviously like that. So they give you swiftness when you pop an aura, is one of their special effects. They give you a light aura, an aura that generally speaking without combo fields an elementalist wouldn't be getting at all. And then last of all, they buff the duration of all auras by 33%. That's a sizable amount, especially considering one of the auras in the game with the highest base duration application is Frost Aura, and Tempest, especially Water Tempest, can pump tons of that out. So if there's any build ever in Guild Wars 2 that could use Radiance runes, it's gonna be some kind of Healy, aura-based elementalist who can then use their other traits to compound the effects of these runes. For example, you can proc a light aura on yourself when you use your heal skill, and then because of your other traits, you can make that then give regeneration and make it give vigor, and you can make that regeneration then cleanse people, or you can make that aura get shared out to everyone and apply protection at the same time. This is cool. This is fun build making. But here's the thing, when I go into my raids, no matter how cool that sounds, no matter how much synergy some of those effects have, when I go into raids, when I decide I want to play on my supporting Tempest Elementalist that uses a lot of auras, do I use Radiance runes? No, because the stats that are paired with Radiance runes are Vitality. And because that Vitality is on there, frankly, the rune set cannot keep up with the far superior Monk runes, which give you not only the stat type I'm actually looking for, which is healing power, but also give me, you know, some other very powerful perks of their own, unrelated to auras, but that just makes them straight up better. If Radiance runes actually had healing power associated with them, maybe I'd be able to use them, and maybe I'd be able to experience what I found was a very fun build to craft. That's what you want. You want these builds that feel like they have a lot of synergy on the theoretical level to actually actually have effectiveness in battle. All right, and that's a very elementalist-based discussion there. This is one of the main reasons why I'm doing this video for you guys. But listen to this list, okay? I just went onto the trading post and looked through the runes. Let's see how many other examples of this we can find. It is not hard, okay? So, Lich runes. Lich runes have an interesting proc on their tier 6, which gives you a minion. Now, let's ignore the actual weakness of that perk itself. The minion's crappy, right? But who would look at these runes? People who want to play like minion mastery, Zergy kinds of builds. That's a cool idea, except why must these builds absolutely care about vitality? You know, if I could use that Lich rune perk with a different stat type, maybe that would be more interesting to me. Grove runes. Grove runes have got a really interesting perk that roots the enemies. It's a way for non-rangers to basically cast entangling roots, or non-druids at that. But why would I care about immobing someone like that when I want to burst them down? But these runes only give me a defensive stat, and a hell of a lot of it. Flock runes have got a very flavorful, really interesting visual effect. They've got like this stuff related to a bird that will come down and strike people and blind them. Oh wait, never mind. Most builds aren't healing power builds, and unfortunately flock runes quite arbitrarily have healing power associated with them. Mercy runes, I believe, are a good example. It's not necessarily that the fact Mercy runes have toughness has no synergy. Toughness on Mercy runes actually makes an awful lot of sense. But there is also a lot of space in this game for people to build offensive builds, ferocity, power, precision-based builds, condition damage builds, but also want to be able to get those quicker pickups. And hey, guess what? They can't do that because the Mercy runes are just stacking them up on a ton of toughness that they might not care about. Toughness especially being bad in certain areas of PvE where that toughness throws off, you know, who's aggroing on you. That can be a really awful side effect. Infiltration runes. Infiltration runes have always been really interesting. They've got these cool procs where you start doing more damage as enemies get on low health, and you've even got a bit of a stealth idea on there. Fun runes, but oh wait, they come with precision. Precision, once again, is a dangerous stat to bundle in with things, especially in PvE, where it's very easy for people to get to that 100% cap without it, and all of a sudden it's like you don't get any stats on this rune set whatsoever. I'm going to keep going. There's an awful lot more. We've got fire runes. Fire runes offer you power, and yet have burning duration perks on them. There's condition damage on the rune of the thief. Now, condition damage might have initially at launch been ArenaNet's idea of one of, you know, thieves' things, but it's quite apparent that 10% damage to foes behind or the side of them is a really interesting idea, but since you've got condition damage on there instead of power-based stuff that would complement it far better, these runes don't see any use. Snowfall runes. What a cool rune set they came out with last year at Winter's Day, but hold on, why must everybody who's playing with those be relegated to some kind of tanky defensive build because they're running toughness? Guardian runes give you burn on block. That could be cool, except they're tying you to toughness and healing power. Burning and Chill Duration are perks for Elementalist runes, but then they give you power on the Elementalist runes. Power and Precision are for the Mesmer runes, which also increase dazing. That's very fun. But maybe I want to increase daze duration on one of my condition damage Mesmer builds. They're fairly common at the moment. In fact, I got to Legendary in this current PvP season on a Mesmer build that applied a lot of daze, and that would have been interesting as a choice if I could have tied it with condition damage, but I couldn't. And then you've just got the absolute abomination, in my opinion. Tempest runes sums up most of the elite specialization to me. Just all over the shop, awful. Healing allies on stun break is one of the perks, but they don't give you healing power with it. They give us random celestial stats, and then the other perks are condition duration. What are you doing, ArenaNet? So hopefully you guys can see the argument here. Hopefully you can see the problem. Yes, you can still make a viable build even if the stats that your runes give you don't have total synergy, but you are gimping yourself for no reason, and when you get to the higher end and people who really care about what they're doing and are trying to optimize their classes, this suddenly becomes a glaring issue. And I do have a little bit of sympathy with ArenaNet here. You know, the answer here is not to say to them, oh, they should just go and tweak and make the perks tied with what people actually want. It's so obvious. Except it's not always obvious. Some people might want to run Snowfall runes, yes, with a tankier build. Some people might run it with a more glassy build. ArenaNet can't always dictate or know that. And in a lot of situations, say Adventure runes, these basically give you a Sigil of Energy proc on your heal skill, the classic Sigil of Energy. Who's to say whether that deserves to be on Vitality, Toughness, Ferocity, Power, Condition Damage, whatever, right? It's valuable for all builds. So what's the main suggestion to fix this? Well, you guys should understand it straight away. It's long been said by people, and it's something I do agree with on a fundamental level. And this is the idea of unlinking those stats from runes altogether. Now, yes, runes as a concept lose some flavor there, but then the idea of a rune, there's a lot more clarity, right? Like, a rune gives you a prominent, specific effect that maybe even has like some visible animation associated with it or something clear that actually impacts the way your skills work or combat unfolds for you. And these stats that the runes would have are then injected or incorporated into people's actual gear, just as we saw ArenaNet exactly identified was a problem with the old trait system. Traits used to be this exact same way. They gave you stats. A lot of the time, those stats weren't related to the perks that were associated with the trait line, so then they split them. And people are asking for ArenaNet to do the same thing here. And I do think, principally speaking, this is a really good idea. This is something I really want to see. It means you would let people pick the runes purely based on the perks. I get to have my Radiance runes, but then I also get to have my healing power stuff, and I'm not, I'm not gimped in any way. So why haven't ArenaNet done this? It seems like a no-brainer. It seems like a no-brainer even way back when they did the trait rework. And well, actually, I think it's because if you look a little bit closer at this, we start to find some complications. So I want to have a bit of discussion on this. I do have a couple of suggestions of my own, but they are not also without flaw. Mostly I'm interested in what you guys have to say. One thing immediately that springs to mind is balance concerns. Perhaps you are in the camp that the perks of Thief runes should never ever be allowed to exist on something like power because it just doesn't work. But I'm not really a big believer of that. I think perhaps there's a caution on ArenaNet's end that this might happen, but I would say you should enact the change that makes your build making so much more fun, and then if things become broken, you shave them down thereafter. I don't think there's going to be anything that wildly swinging, but maybe you guys have some weird examples. No, I think this may have a little more something to do with, what do you do with all the empty slots that are now on the runes because you just removed stats from them? All right, so if you look on the screen here, this should be quite obvious to you guys. Let's look at Perplexity runes, for example. Perplexity runes for us right now, they are 25 condition damage, 10% confusion duration, 50 condition damage, 25% chance to inflict confusion on a hit, 100 condi damage, and then lastly, the final perk of plus 20% confusion duration again, and cause confusion when you interrupt someone. So these are Perplexity runes, and then if we make the change that you unlink the stats and you just infuse those condition damage stats into condition damage based gear sets, your Perplexity runes look like this. An empty slot that someone would equip the rune and get no passive out of it. Then they get a perk, 10% confusion duration. Then nothing. Then they get a perk. Then nothing. Then they get a perk. Is this really the way that we'd want the devs to deal with things? You know, buying items, slotting items into your builds that do absolutely nothing for you? Well, that's just not fun, right? So I don't think anyone's really suggesting that this is what we go with. So what do we do? Well, there are actually a few answers to this. Okay, now the first one I want to discuss is the idea that you can just spread out the existing perks into all of the slots. All right, so under this scenario, this is our Perplexity rune here. Now it's the same stats and everything eventually all told, but every little rung still gives us something. So now it's 5% confusion duration, 5% again, 10% next time, then a 25% chance to inflict confusion on strike, then your final 10% confused duration, then cause confusion when you interrupt a foe. Something like that. Functionally, I think this is one of the most basic solutions you can come to, and I do like the idea. I don't think that this would stop people noticing they're essentially still having to buy runes that don't even give them anything anymore, but on a base level, it works. It's not very pretty, it's not exactly elegant, it's not very fun for the person in PvE, I would say, who is slowly working on his Perplexity rune set, and he's getting such horrible, marginal, unfun little perks each time. But as bloaty as it looks, it's there. I would add, it's really easy to do this with Perplexity runes, or say Strength runes, or some of these more obvious ones, but then how do you make this work with something like Dragon Hunter runes? This is a new set of runes coming out. We can expect more new runes as well to be similar to this. Dragon Hunter runes read as such: 25 ferocity, 35 power, 50 ferocity, 65 power, 100 ferocity, 5 might when you place a trap. Okay, or Trooper runes, a classic rune set that have been powerful too, and that's important. 25 vitality, toughness, vitality, toughness, vitality. Shouts remove a condition from each affected ally. How do you spread that out if you're removing the stats? How do you portion out what is essentially just one thing, remove a condition on a shout, to everyone? Do we still decide to keep some of those slots filled with stats even though we're trying to split them all away after all? Doesn't that then kind of defeat the purpose? Another solution would be to actually have the devs invent entirely new perks for slots, and in many cases I think that works because so many rune sets seem underpowered at the moment. But what do you do when you get to something like Trooper runes? Trooper runes are strong runes, right? They maybe have fallen out of use a little bit right now, but we're talking about adding even more perks to something that's already very strong just because you can't dissolve it down any further. Whatever the case, this solution, though it looks basic at first, you suddenly realize, oh, there's actually a lot of man hours here as the devs have to go into every single different rune set and try to find something that's not going to be ridiculously accidentally overpowered there. Then there's another suggestion too. So this is a really cool one, but it has maybe even bigger drawbacks, okay? And so this idea isn't to spread all of them out over 6 perks and you get this weird bloaty looking list, okay? You just say, all right, we're removing the stats from the runes, so runes don't stack to 6 tiers anymore. You don't equip 6 runes on a build, you just equip 3 runes. And you're done with it. Runes are now just 3 runes. So this would look way better, all right? Perplexity runes. Perplexity would be plus 30% confusion duration. Inflict confusion on your foe when struck. Inflict confusion on your foe when interrupting them. Done. This is clear. This is readable. This is even a lower learning curve and even less bloat, I would say, than the game as it currently stands. This is more fun for average Joe Blogs running around in PvE because if he happens to get a single perplexity rune as a drop, he sees what that buff is, he sees what the other 2 are, and it's actually something reasonable for him to, and affordable, a cool idea for him to finish out the whole set quite easy. This encourages people to try out more rune sets just because of their ease of access. This is very different to having to find 5 more runes instead of just having to find 2 more. And this goes throughout the board. To go back to my original comment here on Radiance runes, Radiance would look like this very delicious rune here. When you receive an aura, gain swiftness. When you heal, gain a light aura. Auras you apply are increased by 33%. This is great. The solution still doesn't stop us having to invent new perks, though. Sometimes, yes, you still have Trooper runes, okay? And we still have to fill in 2 slots. It's just we don't have to fill in 5 now. And sometimes we may even still have to keep stats on runes, but overall, I like it. So why haven't ArenaNet done this? Well, again, I think the core problem here isn't necessarily anything to do with build making at all, but I do think it's a big problem. I think what this comes down to is the fact we're now significantly hitting the economy and some of the reward structures because people are only being asked to have half of the runes they used to. You used to need to buy 6 of these things. Now you only need 3 to finish out your build. That's going to change things in a big, big way. Also, think about this. Players would still have 6 slots on their armor. As interesting of an idea as this is, presumably you're not making the decision to let every player run 2 different rune sets at once, okay? That's hello power creep right there. So you're not letting people do that. So what are you doing? Are you then also manually having to go in and remove rune slots from certain bits of armor? So then how do you decide which bits of armor you're allowed to rune and which ones you're not? You know, what are we just going to say? No runes on the head, gloves, and boots because they're small and they cost less to craft. Is that really a fair way to make that distinction? Is this basically going to then be more confusing to new players who are suddenly like, wait, why can I rune here and not here? Right now, it's a little bit more elegant in that it's sigils go in weapons, rune go in armor, jewels go in jewelry. There you go, you're done. There we lose that and it gets a little bit of muddy. And then really importantly, is doing that or any system like that going to be a giant clusterfuck, right? Requiring you to manually go in and tweak every little piece of armor that you've got in all your loot tables to remove its upgrade slot from it. If they're going to have to do that, all of a sudden, it's way too many man hours. And maybe that's their justification for not having looked closer at this or having implemented it a long time ago. So that brings me to the 3rd suggestion, and I think this is a fairly nice middle ground. This is something that I've been mulling over in my head. It definitely still has its cons and its pros. This isn't really, you know, just a video where I say, oh, this is the perfect solution, ArenaNet, go do it. It's just kind of more food for thought. In fact, I'm hesitant to say it at all because it's quite an extreme concept and people are very resistant to big shakeups. Essentially, this idea would be adding something to complement runes. But I think there is kind of a nice middle ground. What do you guys think about this? Okay, it wouldn't involve messing with the number of upgrade slots on armor. It wouldn't necessarily take loads of manpower, though I cringe to say something like that. It would still allow the devs, very importantly, more freedom in balancing runes in the future. It would allow players more freedom in trying out new runes in the future. It would open up lots more runes just as we're trying to. It would be a clear system to new players. And while this suggestion I'm about to go into would still hit the economy, It's a nice middle ground because it would do good it would do bad in some areas, devalue runes, right? But it would also do some good in some other areas. So the idea would be this, right? You split stats away from runes, just like we want, okay? And then you condense the runes, just like I said a second ago, into 3 juicy tiers, right? So you get all that wonderful perks, and then the runes are in this really, really nice place. Then, okay, with the 3 spare, now unused upgrade slots on your armor, players can now place in those items of their choice to get the stats that the runes were once offering. Yeah, so the suggestion isn't to inject those lost stats from the runes directly into the gear at all. That's not what the idea would be. It's to instead move them to another kind of upgrade item. All right, and I know what you're probably thinking straight away is that sounds like unnecessary bloat and that seems like too much, but it's really not. And the reason it's not unnecessary bloat is because the devs already have a system in the game, a neglected system I've always been sad to see that they could easily repurpose for this. And that system are the marks, the talismans, the seals, the medallions, and the crests. These are upgrade items nobody gives a damn about. Back in the betas, or alphas, I should say, for Guild Wars 2, these essentially were the rune system. These would work just like runes, except they are stats instead of perks. And there would be a finite number of them, 1 for every core attribute in the game. So there would be, there would be a crest for power, and then there would be a crest for healing power, or so on. And players get to pick which one they have. So this is the eventual idea, right? Players would run around while they're exploring Tyria or whatever with 3 runes equipped that gives them all their active, significant battle perks. And also they would have 3 talismans equipped or whatever, right? So I might choose healing power talismans to get the healing power I want, those stats, and then I would pick Radiance runes. And so that problem I established at the start of the video where I want to have both of those, I get to do it. This fixes the problem. I get to try any rune I like with any stat combo I like. I could go Talismans of Penetration to give me Ferocity, to go for my Thief runes, and then I actually get to see that beautiful world where I don't have to take damn Condi damage just to run Thief runes, and so on. Next problem this resolves is that all 6 upgrade slots on everyone's armor continues to be used and continues to be filled by items we all already understand go in armor anyway. There is no manual or crazy dev tweaking to invent like an entirely new system here. As for the economy, while yes, runes would now lose value because people only want 3 of them, the marks and crests and so on, the demand for them goes up, and therefore, in some ways, you've something lost and something gained. Next would be the idea that, players, with this whole condensing of runes into 3 slots, players are upset because, I just got my full set of 6 monk runes, and now ArenaNet are telling me I don't even need them, I wasted all this time, and people are going to feel bad about that. Well, you do a repeat of what happened when they removed Magic's Find as a concept. People can trade in, for a short while after the patch, they can trade in excess runes they have, and everyone's going to have excess runes. You can trade them and exchange them for talismans or whatever of your choice. So, I would give up 3 of my current monk runes, and I would trade them in instead for, 3 healing power talismans. So and then I'd slot them in, and it would be like nothing's changed, but for future builds I create, everything important has changed. The last little thing as well with this would be PvP side. This is essentially just bloat if you were to do this in PvP, because you'd open up the PvP build panel and it would ask you to pick not just a rune and an amulet. Now you have to pick a rune, an amulet, and another slot for whatever gear you'd want. Well, I'd suggest in PvP you don't have to do that at all. In PvP you can keep the original idea. You just inject the stats that once upon a time were in the runes directly into the PvP amulets. And the amulet system pulls through once again, and there we go. We're kind of smooth sailing. So there you go. It's just food for thought, really. Just something to fuel the discussion. Not a particularly serious suggestion from me, but I do like the idea. I could totally understand if some of you guys actually don't even think splitting stats away from the rune set is a good idea in the first place. There are definitely arguments down there. Absolutely, we don't need a massive shake-up to improve this system somehow. Maybe all we do need is the devs to have a light touch and to look at each individual rune set and just improve them straight up, the perks themselves. But it's something that's been on my mind, and especially seeing how much benefit we could get from any of these suggestions, I guess, in this video, to push us into a world where people are more interested in trying different runes. I would love to see this at some point, and I'm sad to see that the devs really didn't talk about this very much, or they didn't get to take their opportunity a while ago back with the trait rework. I suppose the most optimistic outlook here is that they did the trait rework, then they were working full-time on elite specializations, and now, hopefully, they're going to do a bit of elite specialization optimizations for the next expansion, but maybe looking at changing some of these core systems too, because runes could really shine. In any case, I will be down in the comments below. Let's see what you all think, and I'd love to hear your opinions, guys. Thanks very much for watching. I will see you tomorrow for another video. Have a good one, guys.
And then a guard found me while I was watching the stage.
Oh, because it was sunset earlier.
He didn't stand a chance. Bam! Boom! Pow!
I kind of feel bad for the guy.
He was just a LeBlanc thug. And you're one to talk pain. You beat up a bunch of them.
The start of the game.
It sounds like you two had some fun.